If I had known the current world event was going to get this bad, I definitely would have made sure that the last movie I saw before it wasn't Sonic the Hedgehog. It was Uncut Gems, Harley Quinn, Sonic, then... And while it's been a strange year for everyone,
I just want one pack. No, not one pack.
it's really nice to finally have a new movie out. It makes things feel kind of normal, even if I'm too petrified of theaters to see it like I normally would. That's right, fuck you, New Mutants. I would have watched you if you went straight to streaming, but all 2 people who saw it in theaters said it was shit, so yeah, I'm not even gonna waste my time with it now. I feel like we've been spoiled by the multiple Marvel and DC movies every year. There were 8 theatrically released Marvel and DC movies in 2018, so waiting for Wonder Woman and Black Widow to release feels like begging for scraps. Interestingly enough, the release of Harley Quinn at the start of the year and Wonder Woman at the end means that outside of New Mutants, female-led superhero movies by DC Comics led the sphere of superheroic influence for the first time ever, which is pretty cool. I remember seeing the first Wonder Woman in theaters, and while I liked it, I didn't exactly love it, mainly due to how it kind of falls apart during the big gray monster fight in the 3rd act. But that being said, I still appreciate the way it re-established Wonder Woman in the general cultural consciousness. And I remember my ex telling me how much it meant to her to finally see a hero like that on the big screen. As a kid, she had stuff like Sailor Moon on TV, but she had always wanted to see something like that in the theaters. And with the first Wonder Woman movie, she felt like she finally had. And I thought that was pretty cool. When I was a kid, even if I didn't like Superman Returns as much as Spider-Man 2, I still loved to see the scenes of Superman just flying around and saving the day. All that stuff still had a big impact on me. And it's through that lens that I can understand what a movie like Captain Marvel or Wonder Woman might mean for a young girl. Even if it's not always the best movie ever, when you see someone who you can look up to, who reminds you of yourself, what you want to be someday, or something you'd like to become, it awakens a desire to do more and aspire to greater things yourself. Whether you like Man of Steel or not, this is just an amazing video. So I liked the first Wonder Woman movie, but I liked it like I liked Tim Burton's Batman. It's a good movie, it establishes precedent, but it's also really, really basic in terms of its, comic bookness. The executive meddling was obvious and overindulgent, and it completely ruined the 3rd act with that stupid gray monster fight. The first flick felt like a watered-down version of the character, made to appeal to mainstream audiences. It felt like a superhero movie with Wonder Woman in it, instead of being a superhero movie about Wonder Woman. But I feel the opposite way about Wonder Woman 84. You can tell that Patty Jenkins was allowed a lot more freedom, and it really made this movie shine in a way that the first one didn't. I feel like it did a better job getting to the meat of the character and focusing on the traits that made her different from other heroes. Like that Wonder Woman will do everything she can to talk a villain down before resorting to violence, or that Wonder Woman's core character traits are love, empathy, and compassion. I just didn't feel that with the first movie, but I feel it here, and I love that. And another thing I love about the movie is how bright and colorful the world is. In a world of Zack Snyder's monotone palettes and Titan's gray-blue filters, it's absolutely breathtaking to see a movie that embraces color and saturation like this. It's just such a beautiful movie, and I'm absolutely in love with the cinematography of it. And on top of that, the flick is constantly delivering action. All the action set pieces brought a visual flair to the movie that the other DC movies have lacked. The only criticism I have about it in that regard is that sometimes the CGI wasn't exactly believable and was a little bit over-apparent. But I mean, you could apply that criticism to pretty much any movie nowadays. They all really over-rely on CGI, especially superhero movies. Despite some strange pacing in the 2nd act and a prologue chapter that really and honestly serves no purpose and never gets brought up again, the rest of the movie has a really good sense of flow to it. It feels like every few moments there's something important happening, be it Steve and Diana stealing a plane, Wonder Woman stopping random thugs, establishing Lord's motivations, or Cheetah learning the extent of her powers. There's just always something happening. The movie never slows down to let one character give an assload of exposition, or for the characters to debate philosophical ideas that the director clearly doesn't even have a full grasp on. And because of that, even though the movie is technically 2.5 hours long, it doesn't feel like that when you watch it. And speaking of movie length, it almost seems intentionally set up like a 3-part miniseries rather than a 2-hour movie. So does that mean we'll get an extended 3-part Jenkins cut in a few years? Probably not, but it'd be neat if they did. I'd be really interested to learn what was left on the cutting room floor.
Is that a plane?
Come on, I want to show you something.
I loved watching Steve react to 1984. It was everything I wanted to see with Captain America, but Marvel kind of shied away from. I mean, seriously, him and Bucky could have bonded over shit like how different it was watching a baseball game on a cell phone instead of a radio, and then Cap could have said something like,
"Just put it on the speaker and close your eyes, Buck. All sounds the same again after that."
But we never got moments like that because Marvel flicks just move so damn fast. So with that being said, I like that this one wasn't afraid to slow down to give its characters time to develop. Steve Trevor got more relatable moments in the first 20 minutes on screen than Cap did for his entire trilogy. And speaking of character development, I dug Diana a lot more here than I ever have during any of Gal Gadot's other appearances as the character. Diana just has that same problem that Superman does, where she's such a good person and she's so powerful that it makes it really hard to find her relatable. But I think that makes her one fatal mistake have that much more of an impact due to its repercussions on the world around her. I mean, after all, everyone's had their heart broken. So even if Wonder Woman at her core in general is unrelatable, her struggles and her heartbreak are relatable. And I think that's what makes this character more compelling here than she ever has been before. But that's not to say I didn't have problems with Gal Gadot's performance. Even though I think it's the best Diana we've seen yet, I still think Gal Gadot's acting falls really flat in some places, specifically in the scenes with Steve Trevor. And for what it's worth, I can tell she's trying, but the fact that I can tell she's trying might be the issue. What I'm trying to say is that good work goes unnoticed. And I noticed this.
Parallel, no!
But even if I had problems with her dialogue delivery, Gal still does a great job with the action set pieces. And she comes across as a badass warrior, and I love seeing her armored up just kicking ass. But it's just the more personal moments that I found myself falling out of sync with. But on the other hand, one of the performances I was most impressed with was Kristen Wiig's. She was always one of my favorite cast members on SNL, and was easily my favorite part of Anchorman 2. So to see her in a role that has nothing to do with comedy was a big surprise.
Better welcome one.
Because she fucking killed it. Her character's fall from grace was one of my favorite parts of the movie. It was great seeing her turn on Diana over the course of the flick. But one of the weaker parts of the movie were her interactions with Pedro Pascal's Max Lord, a character that I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about.
Life is good. But it can be better.
So before I talk about Max Lord specifically, let's talk about the Trump trope. Now to be clear, I hate Trump as much as the next bread tuber.
So, here's the thing. I fucking hate Trump.
And whether you like him or not, I hope you take the time to hear me out here. The prevalence of Trump-based villains in superhero media has become extremely oversaturated in recent years. And I'm not talking about vague businessmen like Lord Business from the Lego movie. I'm talking about supervillains that have traits directly taken from the former president, and then those traits play out like a bad SNL sketch.
Instead, these irresponsible super children rush in, and the predictable result, an explosion, massive property damage. Sad.
So sad.
Gwenpool's MODOK, Frank Miller's Joker, Spider-Man's Norman Osborn, Young Justice's Lex Luthor, the list goes on. So was Wonder Woman 84 just gonna play into that? Honestly, a little bit yes and a little bit no. I was worried that Pedro Pascal's talent would be wasted on a role that'll be outdated in a few short years, and may already be, seen as the movie was supposed to launch 6 months before the 2020 election, and ended up dropping a month after. They really seem to have one foot in and one foot out of Trump trope. While they clearly took inspiration from Donald Trump's public persona,
I would want all of your power, influence, authority, all the respect you command in the command. Everyone must respect.
they also gave Lord enough of his own character to differentiate from some of the other, less than subtle takes on Trump. And honestly, I thought Lord was a great villain here, and he suits the movie's themes and messages really well. I don't know much about the character in the comics, outside of him killing Ted Kord or his brief appearance on Supergirl, but I know he was like one of the core characters of Justice League International, and that's where the character is established best, but I haven't read it, even though I heard it was like fucking legendary. So if you have any thoughts on how this version of Lord compares to that version of Lord, I'd really like to hear it in the comments below, because I don't have an actual take on it because I've never read the comic. But without the context of the comic book comparison, I still thought Lord was a really good villain. And even though I kinda hated him at first, I ended up growing to love him by the end of the movie. It seems like a lot of the Twitter discourse around the movie is based around how Diana learns to fly, or how the lasso does things here that it's never really done before. But I think it's worth noting that this isn't the first time a movie's exaggerated a hero's powers to do something that they didn't do in the comics, like Superman reading Lois Lane's mind in the old school Reeves movies. And honestly, I feel like this movie had a similar tone to those classic Superman flicks. Diana learning to fly was her taking something she learned from someone she lost and using it to develop her own character. It's representative of her emotional triumph and moving on from her feelings of loss, flying high and free for the first time since she left Themyscira nearly 70 years ago. When you give a hero a new power like that, you can do it one of two ways. Wonder Woman could either get her powers through a MacGuffin, or she could get them through making an emotional triumph, with the MacGuffin method being what most of the Marvel movies have gone for. And I feel like the way her powers were developed here really helped serve the story that was being told, even if it came at the cost of some minor lore inaccuracies. And honestly, if they wanted to throw the entire Snyderverse out the window with this movie, I'd be completely okay with it. Because I love the hopeful, energetic tone of this movie way more than the grim, dark, edgy Snyder shit. But I feel like it's important to talk about the tone of Wonder Woman 84, because it's a lot more similar to Batman 66 than Batman vs Superman. Let me explain. So, I love Batman Forever, and I also enjoy Supergirl and Flash and the other shows that are a part of the Arrowverse. I think of them as fast food TV, and I talk more about that concept in my video on those shows, their issues, and why I keep watching them in spite of those issues. But to sum it up briefly, I'm perfectly fine accepting that superhero media can be really dumb and silly sometimes. It's a way to play up the power fantasy angle of it, and honestly, I kind of love it when that ends up happening. Shows like Batman the Brave and the Bold exist as love letters to the Silver Age of comic books. And when you watch a movie like Wonder Woman 84 through the same lens as you would watch something like Adam West's Batman or Legends of Tomorrow, the minor issues and nitpicks that people on Twitter have with it become a lot less pressing. Except for, you know, the Steve Trevor body swap thing anyway, which is the only thing I can't overlook or justify no matter how hard I try. The only thing I can really say about that is that it's nowhere near as bad as when Ock slept with MJ, while MJ thought she was sleeping with Pete. The whole possession angle was just such a weird, unnecessary addition to the plot. Diana's original origin was that she was made from clay, so why couldn't Steve Trevor just show up naked on a beach somewhere? It seems like they wanted to do something more with the possession subplot, but they didn't have time for it. And I've postulated the theory that if Deadman is a title that's passed from person to person, maybe this makes Steve Trevor a version of Deadman. Who knows? I'm just throwing shit at a wall to see what sticks, man. I really can't overlook this, and I'm convinced it's the one fatal flaw in what would otherwise be the best movie to come out in the DCU yet. It's just such a weird little plot point that never really gets developed or touched on, but is so weird and creepy when you think about it. But anyway, that about wraps up what I think about Wonder Woman 84. All in all, I think it's an 8 out of 10. At least as far as comic book movies go. So I wanted to drop this as my last video for 2020, but that ended up not working out so well. But regardless, I wanted to thank everyone who helped me make this year as great as it was. I know it was a rough year for everyone all around, and I certainly had my fair share of personal struggles. But in spite of it all, it still ended up being a great year for the channel. I went from having 1,000 subscribers at the beginning of the year to having 2.4 thousand at the end of the year. I mean, that number more than doubled, which just blows my fucking mind. So I wanted to thank everyone that helped me out this year. The Spider-Man 2000 retrospective collab went fantastically, and it ended up being the best performing video of the year. So I wanted to thank all the folks that helped me out with that, like Anganoff, Panels to Pixels, Diego Rivera, Crystal Gamer, Chris Baker, and Godzilla Mendoza. But you know, I think the channel's aesthetics also developed a lot over the years, and I think that if you look at the TV Man video, it's a lot more apparent there than it is anywhere else. And I'm honestly surprised that it did so well, given that most of the videos on my channel that aren't about superheroes tend to flop in the algorithm. I took a lot of inspiration from Nerd City for that video, so if you like that video, I really think you should check out his channel if you haven't already. Now, Nerd City needs no introduction. He makes videos that are just unlike anything else on YouTube. They're like if a YouTuber came down from 10 years in the future and then started publishing retrospective videos based on things that were happening today. And the folks from Nerd's community have been nothing but helpful in helping me improve my own channel. From giving me tips on color correction to helping me get equipment that I wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise. What I've learned from that community has been invaluable to upping the production value and the editing on this channel. So I wanted to give a big thank you to all the nerd citizens listed on screen, as well as any of the others that I might have forgotten to list, because they've all helped me in everything from thumbnail design to scripting to learning a few editing tricks here and there. And lastly, I'd like to thank some of these folks as well. Some of them are fellow content creators, and some of them are members of my Discord or mutuals on Twitter. And lastly, I'd like to thank you, because this channel couldn't have gotten to this point without you. Regardless, when this channel grows, it's only possible because of the continued support of folks like these and folks like you. So I wanted to thank you one last time. And finally, I'd also like to thank my supporters on Patreon as well. I hope that 2021 can be kind to all of us. I've got a couple videos in the queue, and I think the first one should be dropping around March. And I've got 2 half-finished rough drafts of the Rusty Cage and Cringe videos available on my Patreon, and there should be a half-finished rough draft of the Twin Peaks video uploaded to my Patreon by the end of the month. So if you want to see any Swim Team content between now and then, feel free to join my Patreon and let me know what you thought about how those videos are coming along. Then I'll add your name to this end screen as well. But between now and then, you'll still be able to catch me on streams Saturday at 8 p.m. So with all that being said, I've been Swim Team Captain 7 from Super Swim Team 7, signing off.